The two-state solution was dead decades ago because of the settlements. Not settlements, that's a temporary residence. They are colonies, they are permanent colonies. They are built intentionally in locations to strangulate Palestinian towns. Bethlehem, for example. Bethlehem is now about an eighth of the size it was in 1967. It's ringed with settlements. It's like putting hands around the neck. It's intended to strangulate the indigenous population.
So, Reverend Sizer, welcome again. What is troubling you related to Israel at this time?
So many things. It's traumatizing. There's a limit to how many videos you can watch, harrowing videos of children crying, injured, killed, parents beside themselves, seeing their little ones murdered, crying out for food when there is none, and then when they're queuing up, being shot. It's deeply traumatizing, but I have to keep reminding myself that it's far, far, far worse for our sisters and brothers in Gaza. So it's traumatizing. I feel frustrated. I feel helpless. I feel traumatized. But I think worst of all, I feel deeply, deeply upset at the consequences of the inaction of our European and American politicians, church leaders, civic leaders. Their silence, their unwillingness to even use the word apartheid or genocide or ethnic cleansing indicates their complicity. And that's either that's because of their trade links with Israel, the economic collusion, perhaps it's intelligence sharing, weapons, buying and selling. It's the power of the Israel lobby, who finance our Western politicians to keep them in check, or a culmination of those reasons. But I'm deeply angry at our politicians who are unwilling to act. On the one hand, they say, yes, this is appalling, but what can we do? At the same time, they're selling weapons to Israel. They are providing intelligence for Israel. So they are complicit. And that's what upsets me most, because of the implications. You know, Europe, America, in the past has emphasized our commitment to the international rule of law, that we uphold the United Nations, that we stand by the International Criminal Court, the Court of Justice. And yet here we are giving a pass to our friend, Israel, without realizing the implications that will have on our own citizens when we travel, when we are subject to the same brutality. On what basis can we complain? On what basis can we call for the work of the United Nations or the International Criminal Court or Court of Justice when we ourselves are inhibiting the implementation of that law when it comes to Israel?
Nevertheless, the picture you have given us has not stopped you from being active, clearly giving a message that this is not the way to go. Could you maybe single a point or two of some of your involvements that have emerged from your concerns over the last several months?
Well, I'm first and foremost a retired pastor, a Bible teacher. I'm not a politician. I'm not an activist in that sense. So my primary concern is to deconstruct and destroy the foundation of much of Western Christian nationalism, Christian Zionism, which undergirds all that Israel is doing. The only reason the US and Europe is so compliant with Israel's apartheid regime is because it's undergirded by a pseudo-Christian, a heretical Christian perspective that somehow says the Jews are God's chosen people, therefore Israel is above international law, Israel is the apple of God's eye, and therefore we must support Israel. I know we'll elaborate on that later in our conversation, but that's my first burden or responsibility, is to continue to challenge that theology, show it's a heresy, and make my Christian Zionist colleagues squirm when we expose how ludicrous or how superficial or how distorted their reading of the Bible is. But in terms of activism, we have to look for what are the weak links in this chain between Israeli genocide in Gaza and Western complicity. We must use the democratic rights and processes that are ours. If we don't use them, we'll lose them. So challenging our politicians, holding them accountable, helping them realize that we will not forget, that we will hold them accountable for war crimes because of their complicity with Israel. And I think some of our politicians are thinking about the consequences of that. We participate in the monthly national demonstrations here in England. We hold them in London. We have hundreds of thousands of people coming together to protest about the genocide and Britain's complicity. And alongside that is working very closely with Jewish and Muslim and secular groups who share a common burden, a common conviction that genocide is wrong and that we must oppose it, whoever is suffering, and we must hold those responsible accountable. So the work of the Convivencia Alliance, the work of Christian organizations like Sabeel, Kairos, Embrace the Middle East, and others, and ICAD, the International Coalition Against House Demolitions. Those are organizations I work with closely. Campaign is another one, challenging misrepresentation in the public media, calling for BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, calling for the complete boycott of Israeli goods, Israeli cultural, sport events, music, political, anything, boycotting Israel, isolating them in the same way that we brought about the end of apartheid in South Africa through BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. Those are some of the ways in which we are active, feel that we're trying to make a difference, leveraging the influence, the little influence we have here in the West.
And by now, quite a number of countries have recognized the Palestinian state. What do you see coming out of this? Is there any hope, or is this just coming a little bit too late?
It's a very topical issue, and it's a controversial one. I'm, on the one hand, encouraged that at last some Western politicians are catching up with the rest of the world, because the vast majority of countries in the world recognized the state of Palestine decades ago, or at least years ago. But the European leaders reluctantly being dragged into the spotlight are recognizing that Israel has gone too far. The genocide, the ethnic cleansing, war crimes investigations are mounting, and Israel has no sign that it's negotiating, willing to pull back. It's now talking about annexing the West Bank, along as it has Jerusalem and the Golan and so on. Rebuilding Gaza as a little Trump empire. It's excruciatingly embarrassing for political leaders in Europe. So they are coming on board and claiming that they now support a two-state solution. The two-state solution was dead decades ago because of the settlements. They're not settlements, that's a temporary residence. They are colonies, they are permanent colonies. They are built intentionally in locations to strangulate Palestinian towns. Bethlehem, for example. Bethlehem is now about an eighth of the size it was in 1967. It's ringed with settlements. It's like putting hands around the neck. It's intended to strangulate the indigenous population, to create urban ghettos in Ramallah, Hebron, Tulkarm, Jenin, East Jerusalem, surrounded by colonies of exclusive Jews-only settlements. And these are radical, violent terrorists who are being subsidized, being protected by the Israeli army and police in order to terrorize the indigenous Palestinian people. The problem Israel faces, and the dilemma our Western governments face, is that history has shown that segregation, apartheid, does not work. Slavery was ended, at least in the British Empire, because the British government subsidized slave owners, compensated slave owners for their slaves. There were financial inducements to give up slaves in order to liberate the slaves. And then it ended with segregation. The racism continued, the lynchings continued, the denigration, the subjugation of blacks in America continued and continues today. I support the one-state solution, one democratic state for all in historic Palestine. And it's too soon, we know. It's too late for the two states, it's too soon for the one state, but God willing, we can move to a transition if, only if, Western governments will cut ties with Israel and will force Israel back to those 1967 borders. Israel is being increasingly isolated. That's why BDS is so important, boycotting them from European football, from the Eurovision Song Contest, from sporting events, from cultural events, music events, until Israeli civic society chooses leaders who will recognize that they must uphold international law and allow Palestinians the same rights that they enjoy, either as equal citizens in one state or a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. So I'm hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. I'm fearful that it's too slow. And that historically, when diplomacy fails, war becomes inevitable. I hope and pray that that is not going to happen. And I fear for the future, but I believe in a God who has told us what's going to happen in the end. And if we read the last page of the Bible, it talks about Jerusalem and the leaves of the tree of life, healing the nations. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And that gives us a motivation to be part of that healing process, to be agents of reconciliation, peacemaking, confronting evil, challenging evil, but building a future where all are treated equally, all may enjoy the blessings of God's creation on this earth.
It seems to me that much of the world actually very clearly sees what is going on. Yes, there is a lot of hypocrisy at the same time, but there is also lots of criticism. I would specifically like to focus us at this moment on those countries that are actively, proactively making it possible for Israel to pursue genocide. In many ways, not only by providing whatever means necessary to carry on with this genocide, but actually by bullying anyone who does not agree with what is going on there. For example, one of the latest steps by the US government, this government right now has been, which I think is very manipulative and bullying, to deny the arrival of the Palestinian delegation to attend a session of the Council of the United Nations, quite a large group of people. Even the leader of the Palestinian people, I'm not talking about Hamas, Palestinian people, is denied to come and speak from the platform of the United Nations, and he has to do it virtually. Why is this so, and what do you think are the potential consequences of this kind of behavior of the global superpower, which is going contrary to the rest of the world, which is crying and saying it is really enough?
The Israel lobby, really, the Israeli leadership couldn't care less what you and I think. Even the vast majority of US citizens or European citizens, they couldn't care less. They have a conscience, we have a conscience. They know what they're doing is wrong, but they have an agenda. And what they care about is having hold over and influence over our leaders, our political leaders, our business leaders, our media. In the intelligence world, every country uses assets. It has what are called sleepers. These are people sympathetic to a particular regime who live in another country, who have normal lives, who go about their business, and when they are needed, they are woken up and then they set to work doing subversive acts, sabotage, and so on. You have to look at the Israel lobby and its influence, just for example, over the US political system, the media, and so on. To put it crudely, if it's a bit like gambling. Imagine a horse race. There are 4 horses, 10 horses in the race. It doesn't matter how many there are. Israel is gambling, betting on every single horse, which means that they always win. And in your political system, you're either a Democrat or a Republican. That's an easy one because it means that the Israel lobby bankrolls politicians of both political parties. And if an individual politician steps out of line, doesn't comply with the crib sheets, the speeches provided by the Israel lobby, then the funding goes to their opponent or an alternative politician who will be glad to take their place. Let me just give you just a very simple mathematical formula that helps to understand this. If I was to ask you, what do you think the entire budget is for the Democrat Party and the Republican Party every 4 years when there is a presidential election, when the senators are being elected, when the congressmen are being elected? What is the entire budget? Well, it's hard to estimate, but let's play with figures. Let's say $1 billion. Well, Israel receives $4, $5, $6 billion a year from the United States. So the Israel lobby is taking US money and using it to buy US politicians to ensure that they get a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 return on their investment. If I gave you $100 and you gave me $500 back, I would keep giving you the money knowing I'm getting a 5-to-1 return. It's just a fact that is how Israel ensures whoever is in the White House, whoever has a majority in Congress, neither party will step out of line and challenge an Israel agenda. Israeli politicians have boasted about their influence over US politicians, and it's no different here in Europe. We have a conservative Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Israel, Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel, and they will destroy politicians who challenge the Israeli agenda. Jeremy Corbyn, for example, accusing him of anti-Semitism when he spent a lifetime, decades, campaigning against racism, defending Jews from white nationalists. So that's the primary reason why our politicians are so reluctant to move against Israel's interests. They manipulate our foreign policy, undermining the rule of international law. And that's why I said it is very, very short-sighted of our politicians, because the consequences are catastrophic when it comes to wanting to challenge China about its growing empire, or Russia and its interest in retaking countries that have emerged out of communism. On what basis can we say under international law that China or Russia must be held accountable when we do not apply the same laws to Israel? Martha Isaac said that Gaza is the moral compass of the world, and sadly our politicians are failing morally. They are failing morally because they will not uphold basic human rights, basic international law when it comes to the rights of the Palestinians.
What is being done today with the concepts of anti-Semitism? I think it is very important to say something again, because the weaponization of anti-Semitism is really, 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 I would say, and wild. Not a long time ago, I believed I understood what anti-Semitism was. But today we are being told that criticizing Israel, not agreeing with the policies and with the attitudes and behavior of Israel, and not agreeing with Israel simply killing or obliterating on a daily basis so many lives, this is being treated as if we are being anti-Semitic. What is going on? How is the anti-Semitism being weaponized, abused, misused today against anyone? who dares question what Israel is doing.
And most people know what it is. Anti-Semitism is a prejudice, hostility, resentment of Jews and Arabs, both are Semites, because they are Jewish or because they are Arab. Prejudice toward Jews because they are Jews. Prejudice toward Arabs because they are Arabs. They're both Semitic. They both arise as the children of Abraham. And therefore, the very fact that we use it exclusively, or it has been used exclusively for prejudice, hostility, resentment, hatred, animosity, attacks on Jews because they are Jews, is itself problematic. Because in doing so, we give a pass to Islamophobia, to anti-Arab sentiment, which is just as evil, just as reprehensible as doing the same to Jewish people. So the definition of anti-Semitism is clear. You go to any dictionary and it's self-evident. It's a form of racism, and any form of racism, any form of prejudice toward people because of their ethnicity, their color, their language, their religion is wrong. And that's why it's criminalized, certainly here in the UK. But knowing that, and knowing that Zionism is dying, it's in terms of demographics, if you in polls, particularly in the States, those typically under the age of 30 are far, far more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel. If you're looking at 60-year-olds plus, it's the other way around. So there's a demographic shift, and that's because younger generations are more inclined to be using social media than the mainstream media, monopolized by a few billionaires who control the newspapers and TV channels. They're more likely to be using social media. They're more likely to be aware of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, because Palestinians are recording live their own genocide. The genocide of the Armenians was largely hidden. What was going on in the concentration camps in Germany was largely hidden. The Nazis thought they could get away with it. The Turks thought they could get away with the genocide of the Armenians. Israelis cannot get away with genocide in Gaza because it's being recorded, on telephones. You don't need a camera. So younger generations are much more aware, and so Zionists are recognizing time is running out. And so they have weaponized anti-Semitism as a pushback to silence critics. How they've done this is by redefining anti-Semitism. If you go on a railway station, on a platform, there's normally a line, a yellow line or a white line, and it's clear you must not cross that line unless the train has stopped, because trains are maybe going through the platform quickly, and you might get sucked into it if you're too close to the edge of the platform. If you're driving and there's a red light, there's a white line on the road. Do not cross this white line while the red light is shining, otherwise you might hit the car. What Zionists have done is they've rubbed out that line. They've rubbed it out intentionally by making the definition of anti-Semitism ambiguous. You're driving down the motorway, you enter a fog, what do? You slow down, you put your lights on. You are nervous. You're careful in case you hit the car in front of you or someone goes into the back of you. That's what they've done with the definition of anti-Semitism. It's called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance Working Definition of Anti-Semitism. It was dreamed up by 2 or 3 academics as a working definition to elaborate what anti-Semitism is. It falls at the first hurdle of a definition, because by definition cannot be indefinite. And in the first sentence of the IHRA working definition, you find the word may. It says anti-Semitism may ... which means it may not, which means you need another definition to determine whether it may or may not apply. Do you see what I'm saying? If you add an indefinite word, may, you've destroyed a definition, and that's intentional. And and so, for example, the IHRA says that anti-Semitism may be displayed toward Jews or non-Jews. So it could be anti-Semitic of me to criticize you, even though you're not Jewish. You see, you've made it incredibly ambiguous. And in the examples, many of them have referred to Israel. And by sleight of hand, what Israel has done, what the Zionists have done, is they have joined two things that are not the same: Israel and Jewish people. They said Israel is a Jewish state, it's a Jewish collective. Every Jew in the world has a place in Israel. Therefore, if you criticize Israel, you're criticizing Jews, therefore it's anti-Semitic. So that's how they've weaponized anti-Semitism, to silence criticism. It's just designed to discredit those who challenge what Israel is doing. Frankly, everyone becomes anti-Semitic on that basis. You've diluted it so far that it's meaningless. That's what's happened to the definition of anti-Semitism. It's been weaponized by diluting it and making it ambiguous, so that everyone is afraid they don't know where the line is. And that's why we must insist on using a traditional definition of anti-Semitism that can be applied in law as to what is and what is not anti-Semitic.
There are actually two concepts, two words that are being weaponized in a very serious manner. One is anti-Semitism. It is becoming a dangerous thing to criticize Israel and the genocide it is committing, because easily you become labeled as being anti-Semitic. There is also another concept that has come to the front in full force very recently, and this is the radical left. The radical left. It seems today, as someone has said, if we are going to use the term radical left, then it could generously be applied to half of America for anything, Anything that is not according to the liking of this president can easily be labeled as a radical leftism. That's our situation right now. But this is now leading us to the next question. So many millions of predominantly evangelical Christians who are without any criteria, completely, unconditionally turning their blind eyes and supporting Israel at this time. Why is that so?
It's partly education and it's partly a Christian faith. If we deal with education first, you have to ask whether in our school curriculums, whether it's in Europe or the United States, we address colonialism, whether we have addressed slavery, whether we've considered the consequences of segregation, which came out of slavery, and from segregation, separation, and apartheid in South Africa. Because there are strong parallels between the rise of fascism, the rise of Nazism, the rise of white nationalism, of apartheid in South Africa and other countries too, whether we're dealing with Australia and the Aborigines, or New Zealand and the Maoris, or Canada and the United States with the Native Americans, or in Latin America. The rise of European, and I include America in this, white colonialism has led to a theology of supremacism, a theology of nationalism. We've created God in our image, and we've sacralized our lifestyle, our rights, our privileges. But conversely, we have failed intentionally to recognize the value of others who are not like us, who have other ethnicities, nationalities. We've either enslaved them or we have subjugated them in order to lay claim to, steal their natural resources, their land, their territory, their heritage even. So we have to think of our upbringing, history, what we've learned, what we've been taught, what we understand about our identity, But much of Christianity in the West, in the United States and Europe, is born out of this colonial mentality, this white supremacism, this nationalism. Rule Britannia, the first word of our national anthem is God. God save our gracious King. Mixing religion and politics. But to drill down to the theology, we're dealing with a very superficial understanding of the Bible. Most Christians are illiterate theologically. They believe what their pastor tells them. In the Acts of the Apostles, it says the Bereans were more noble than some of the other ethnic groups because they tested what the Apostle Paul said from the scriptures. They were being taught, but they tested what they were being taught by what the scriptures said. And too many Christians don't do that. They'll read a book by a famous Christian and they'll believe that it's biblical simply because it's been written by a Christian. The reason I got into this whole area of theology was because I was raised on that theology, that Israel was God's chosen people. God had given them all the land in the Middle East, that Jerusalem was their capital, the temple was going to be rebuilt any day now, Jesus would return, there'd be a war of Armageddon. This kind of theology has profound impacts on our politics, our worldview of others who don't agree with us. I'm old enough to remember Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth, when Russia was an atheistic communist regime. They were the Antichrist, and it was easy to read the Bible through that grid, that the Antichrist was Russia, we in the West were Christian, we in the West were democratic, free, freedom-loving, God is on our side, neglecting the fact that there was an indigenous church in Russia, in Eastern Europe, as there is in China, neglecting to recognize the basic teaching of Jesus: love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, feed the poor, defend the weak, and so on. So, being raised on that kind of theology and then engaging with Jewish people and Palestinians in Israel and Palestine forced me to go back to the Bible. And that was why I wrote my book, Zion's Christian Soldiers. I probably can't see it there. To deconstruct this theology. And to be frank, this theology is like a hot air balloon. It's full of hot air. There's no substance to it. It pulls together a string of Bible verses. How many pins do you need to burst a balloon? Well, I give you 7 in my book. Anyone will do. Anyone will burst the balloon. Just for example, the word chosen is never used in the New Testament of the Jewish people. Not once. It's only used of Jesus and those who follow him, whether they're Jews or Gentiles. It's never used of Israel, never used of the Jewish people in the Christian scriptures. The temple does not need to be rebuilt. Jesus is the temple. He said he was the temple. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, God said to Abraham, and through your seed all nations on earth will be blessed. Zionists say Israel is the seed. We are descended from Abraham. It's not what the New Testament says. Galatians chapter 3 says that Jesus is the seed, singular, not plural. And if we believe in Jesus, we inherit the promises God made to Abraham. So there is no place for a secular Israel in the New Testament. Jews and other ethnic groups are welcome to come to Jesus. They are welcome to be blessed within the people of God. But it's not on the basis of Zionism, which is an apostasy. It's a heresy. It's a reflection of white supremacism translated into contemporary Middle East today.
Reverend Stephen Sizer, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us, and I'm looking forward for the continuation of our conversation shortly.